All right, before I get started though, I wanted to just briefly talk, kind of pick your brains and think about what have we learned about AI over this last semester? Because there's been lots of changings that have been happening with AI. And one of the things that I have found is that I look at AI tools in the news, I look at AI tools in education, I kind of play around with them. I can't keep up with it myself. There's always something new to learn. And I really find that I often find some of the best ideas from other people who have kind of sifted themselves and found this really cool tool that helps them out. And so there's always something new to learn about AI, such as, so we're going to do a parent share discussion, such as Coca-Cola came out with a flavor designed by AI. So there's a whole flavor of Coca-Cola designed by AI, and I actually have some with me today. So if you wanted, I know it's a little early for Coke, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And so I'll pass this around as you kind of are thinking about the question. What is one thing you learned about AI this semester that you didn't know before? So just kind of talk to somebody next to you and then we'll share some of the ideas. For those of you online, feel free to throw some stuff into chat and I will read that out and we'll integrate that in there into the discussion as well. Sorry, I can't share any Coke with you, even though it is AI designed. I can't transport it to your room. So I'll just pass these cans around and I'll get some, thank you very much, Kate. So just take
design Coca-Cola.
AI flavor, AI design Coca-Cola.
Yes.
It's made in it. Talk a little bit about AI.
Let's give it a try.
Was this just last? So
All right.
I didn't even speak to that. Tell me about it.
Joined online, we are discussing what something you learned about AI this semester you didn't know before. Feel free to put that in the chat.
So they tried to do argumentation.
Yeah. Very much.
And it's like the generic. The nuance. I used to drink in college. The things like how to write for an audience. How to
like the colors in the
it does.
just kind of fruity and
What's the argument? So
Yeah.
the position of
What about the strong flavor?
Well, what AI?
Some people that
I'm actually reading
went
this
to
book
like
right
quick trip and did all the flavors. For one.
You know what it does? Cause
Some
it's like the
things
bluegrass.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, tell us what they want to really.
It does taste like
and
engineering.
future,
Kind of
it's definitely futuristic.
And everything he does in there is created or some other yeah.
All right, well, nothing I can come up with the others.
And it's pretty impressive. I mean, the writing that we can generate that I think is pretty impressive, including he actually has that whole chapter about that. So that's why I was teaching them. I do think.
What do you think?
Okay.
So it's very specific.
So it's great. It's supposed to taste like.
So like,
I think it's
like how to design this.
Wow.
Big Hillary.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing like that I do take away is that it can't like you have to iterate.
But even now,
I challenge them to there is created like a finding
I think even here,
but if you were reading what's made it not like and that we use like really like 4 something it's just like you can get some really some stuff. So maybe we should use like and human skills. Yeah, to figure out how to exactly. Yeah. So far.
Forget about
I mean, I think that the future generation of AI is it will be covered, right? It's basically a moot point.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so let's wrap up.
So,
this
right.
conversation here.
Yeah.
Anything online? What is one thing that you learned about AI this semester you didn't know before?
But I told
All right, well, let's share, what were some of the conversations that you all had? What were some of the things that you learned about AI? Yes.
One thing that I don't know that I learned it, but I was reminded of it recently is the environmental impacts of AI. And how, things like using it to come up with a code flavor might be a pretty,
Questionable.
questionable use of something that has a lot of, environmental impact.
Yeah, so be mindful of the environmental impact, yes. Anybody else? Thank you. Heard a lot of discussion, yes.
I guess I was unaware of how much server space and just, literal space and storage the AI takes, and then how much money that takes to support. So I guess I've become a little bit more attuned to how it's fairly likely that, very, very large companies that have billions, to spend on this
Yeah.
are the ones that are probably gonna be able to control this tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so because of the cost of it, I didn't realize the scope of the cost, and moving forward, it's just gonna increase exponentially. So that just has a lot of implications that I was totally unaware of.
Be mindful of that, yes. It is interesting, though, that you can actually put some of those AI tools onto your own home computer as well. So sometimes there's a little bit of leveling, but there's also that hierarchical, like the cutting edge stuff is always going to require all that service, service space. Online, I just want to get Hillary's out there. Hillary Snow wrote, regarding what I've learned, I originally thought that AI would just be an avenue for cheating, but I'm convinced that it does have a role in my students' education. I'm also not worried about catching AI work. When it's poorly done by the student, it is obvious, and the student has to learn something to do it well. I still want them to write their own papers, though. And Doris writes that AI doesn't know everything and can make mistakes. So that's a good one. Sarah.
Yeah, so I'm on one of the workforces with the AI task force, and we sent a survey to students, and we got about 175 responses back, and I thought the students would be all over it, and we'd see all sorts of responses of cheating. But out of 175, only 3 said they used it to cheat, or for some that they thought their friends were cheating and they thought maybe they should because their friends were cheating. But the vast majority, about half of them aren't using it at all, and many say I actively hate it and are very resistant, which was interesting to me. And then the other half were using it for really interesting things like helping them quiz so they can get ready for tests, or writing outlines of chapters so they can make sure they understand the key points and they're studying the right information, or coming up with ideas for topics. So it wasn't as nefarious as one might think. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm hearing a lot about, oh, the cheating is so rampant. And I'm not saying that people don't cheat, but that they're really using it to enhance their learning was encouraging to me.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too. I mean, because this is a stat I always talk about, but 2018, before COVID, before AI, 44 to 60% of students already were cheating. So what you're kind of suggesting is that that's not moving the needle as much as you're going to have those students that we're going to, but that there's also a lot of really good benefits for students as well. Mark, and then I'll get to Heidi.
I guess I have 2 different things. One was how quickly it advances. My daughter, partway through a semester, was told, "Oh, you can't use that anymore." She was using something to help her with grammar, and now that program has upped its ante to the point where it's now like, no, you can't use it anymore. So I think being aware of how rapidly it changes is something that I have a real hard time with. The other thing that I found was a real limitation on it, and I said this before, in a discipline course I teach has a very small literature, much of it obscure. It can't even recognize the prompt very well in some cases. So I'm not too worried about that. I've told my students they could use it to help improve their papers, but judging from what I've gotten in terms of grammatical instruction and logic, that hasn't happened. So I suspect there's less use of it than we think, but it was helpful to talk to them about the limitations of for the course of the use of the tool. They seem to appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much for keeping that in mind for the students too. Heidi.
Something that I've sort of like, a conclusion that I've come to that's not perfect, that just from interacting with AI and then hearing stories of how students are using AI, I'm noticing a pattern very similar to my experience with Wikipedia when I was in college, and like they are very different tools. I'm very aware of how different they are and how they function. But I'm noticing students are reaching for Wikipedia in a really similar way, at least according to like the data that Sarah's collected and some anecdotes I've heard. They're using AI in similar to ways that like in college, I would have used Wikipedia. And back then I felt like worried, like, was I cheating by, but I was studying Spanish history and there are so many popes and so many like princes and princesses, and trying to keep that all straight while comprehending an academic piece of writing that I was new to reading and sort of digesting. Like I really relied heavily on those reference sources. And I think that it's pointing to a same need that's been there for college students who are getting mastery in their disciplines, as they're not there and they're looking for supports to get them to a certain level of disciplinary literacy. I don't think they would describe it in those terms, but yeah, I think we see some similar patterns, and I think that that is an arc, maybe not to follow or like to believe we're going to follow with AI, but I think it's worth being aware of kind of similarities of practices and student needs that are being filled by a tool.
Thank you very much. David.
Yeah, I'm teaching students in a digital arts course this semester, and a lot of them, they're presenting like portfolios of their work this week. And part of the process of developing the portfolio was them like reflecting on if they want to use AI, if they want to show how they can use AI tools like in their work. And a lot of like on the design and the visual end, a lot of my students have said that because they use things like the Adobe Suite or Photoshop, they keep getting a lot of ads about AI like directed towards them wherever they go. But then when they use the tools, it's not very helpful with what they're trying to achieve. So it's interesting how on like the visual and the design end, they're kind of running into the same issues that some of the students in the survey talked about, where it's like maybe it's good for like generating ideas, or for like Adobe Photoshop is really pushing this generative fill tool where you have like an image and then they can build around it. And so my students have talked about how it might give them an idea of like, oh, I can add this on the outside or add this kind of image within what I'm working on, but the actual tool itself doesn't achieve what they want it to do. So it's good to see my designers are also like thinking critically about how they want to use those things too.
Thank you very much, David. I'm going to, one thing, just kind of aside, in terms of AI, I discovered last week that there is a Snoopy face on my Apple Watch. You're like, okay, that's not AI. But the Snoopy face has different animations, and the animations change based on the connection of the watch to the internet and my location and to my personal profile as well. And it's all kept within my little account. So today it was giving me lots of balloons and birthday stuff. When it rains, there's Snoopy with an umbrella. When it's dinner time, there he's eating food. When it's nighttime, like all these things are attached. And this is AI. It's more frivolous, and maybe it's an environmental waste, but it makes me smile every time I look. So I just throw that one out there as well.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more optimistic after the new Coca-Cola.
Yes. That's right there. Manuel Cudjoe, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name, has a really good comment online as well, and just notes that AI produces good results when users give appropriate prompts. Otherwise, it gives you those lousy results that we sometimes see, and especially in data analytics. And I think the way forward, according to Emmanuel, is to focus on hybrid intelligence, the intersection of AI and human intelligence. So teaching students how to use this. This is what Duke and the American universities business schools are both doing, which is really just saying, not only are you allowed to use AI, you are expected to use AI because it will help you do your job better. And so that's just really kind of a good comment right there. Thank you, Emmanuel. And then, yes, prompt engineering or AI literacy could be added as sort of maybe a curriculum for students as well. Another comment online. So thank you, everybody, for your participation. I really appreciate that. But now we want to get to the real show. today, and I'd love to welcome Kate Gansky and Heidi Anzonko. Before you get up, I'll just give a quick introduction to both of them. Kate Gansky is a Library Associate Director for User Service at UWM Libraries. She has published numerous papers on topics on a wide-ranging as information literacy, curriculum design, the research project process, and library e-resources. We are also lucky to be joined by Heidi Anzonko. Heidi is an instructional design librarian who received her Master of Library and Information Science here at UW Milwaukee. At the library, Heidi works on instructional technology and design and provides excellent instruction to students in library research strategies, which I know because she has partnered with me on 2 of the courses I've taught here at UWM. And it's just so fabulous to see the improvement of the research strategies and methods as a result of participating with Heidi in that class. So welcome both of you. Thanks for being here.
That's great. So nice to see so many people that I already well know in person and a lot of people online. Thanks for being here today. Obviously, you're here to learn about academic libraries and generative AI. Our emphasis today is really on academic libraries and student research at the intersection of generative AI. We've already done our introductions. Thanks, Lane, for those nice introductions. If you want our email addresses, they're here as well, but you'll also find them on Lane's handout. So let's jump into, again, thinking about this, the library and expertise that we're bringing today and that we want to focus on. So when you think about the library, you might have a sense of what a librarian does or a sense of the library's training. As Lane mentioned, Heidi and I are coming from the Division of User Services, which means that the expertise that we bring and that we'll be discussing today is really around the conceptual understanding of using, evaluating, and interacting with information. So thinking about information-seeking behavior, we have years of experience observing and working with students as they try to work with information, find it, evaluate it, incorporate it into their prior knowledge as well. And we've been especially trained with an attention towards information ethics. So very much focused on issues of privacy, issues of authorship, copyright, etc. What we are not going to be talking about today are other areas of library expertise, such as archives, cataloging, information discovery tools. Although I will point you on your handout, in our bibliography, we have a few really helpful resources there. One of them contains a list of tools that Ithaca SNR, which is a research organization, they are keeping track of new tools that are being developed for the higher education marketplace. And Lane in his handout has already started to explore a few of those and made some recommendations for you. So if you want to dive into more of the specific tools that are being developed around scholarly literature and to really aid scholars, you have that there in your handout. So Heidi's going to talk a little bit more about our expertise.
Yeah, so like many of you, AI is I don't want to say it is it is changing certain areas that many of us have spent like decades developing expertise in. So touching a little bit on information discovery and access to that is you're searching, you're getting that full text article. I think with the knowledge that a lot of these tools can make a lot of money as products, I think like a lot of industries, library tools, library discovery tools, so like search tools, catalogs, are pushing forward and talking about the new innovations they have around conversational discovery. So like chat-based search tools and all these AI integrations into search tools, some that we see, like that conversational discovery, some that we don't see, so more metadata generation and cataloging back-end things. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of aspirational blog posts and YouTube videos, but it's an indefinite timeline right now. So we know these things are coming, we're trying to stay on top of them, be aware of them. But it's unknown at this point when we'll get them, and is this going to be an additional product cost that our institution would need to sustain? And so
Yeah,
go.
so then, oh, did you have more to say on that first
No.
point? Okay. So again, the other areas where we see AI really impacting are areas that we engage students and faculty around are these issues of information abundance and information literacy. So information literacy actually just celebrated its 50th anniversary as a unique field and unique term in use. And so you'll notice with that term that it's older than the internet. Yet, so already pre-internet, people were feeling like there's way too much information and we really need the librarians to organize it and we need help finding it and making sure we're finding the right information. But really with the first entrance of the internet, kind of web 1.0, information literacy really became more of a critical area of need in higher education. And that continued to only blossom with Web 2.0 as information became hyperlinked and interactive. And then it blossomed again with Web 3.0 with the social media, and we all had alarmist reactions like, will students be able to decipher fake news from real information? And now we're again at a critical point where how can our conceptual knowledge and understanding of information help us and our students navigate a world where content is produced by AI? How can we help, how will our understanding and conceptual frameworks, knowledge, skills help us navigate all this information abundance? And in one sense, I think what we are experiencing in libraries as a positive is AI should help us with the information abundance. That is only going to accelerate. There's only going to be more and more information. And we already know, you already know, as an expert in your field, how hard it is to keep up with all of that information and the continual production of it. So we're here to assist with that.
Yeah, so in addition to like this move from logic-based discovery to conversational discovery that we're seeing on sort of the front end, there's also sort of back end of the tool, and then also sort of the larger implications of research that we have some expertise in. So of course, I think the biggest ethical problem that we are not the first to raise is large language or LLMs as sort of a black box. We don't necessarily know the content. And I'm noticing as I've been trying a variety of different tools, both chat tools, the Adobe integrated tools, things like that, that different models respond to different languages in your prompts and different approaches to prompting and are in a completely different context from one to another. And so there's still this sort of evaluative process of our searchers of what is the language for this tool, which is what they're doing in search tools, what we'd like them to do in those academic search tools as well. And then kind of like helping students, faculty, and creators navigate this sort of muddled realm of, how is my data being farmed by using this tool? How am I being made a profit? How is my work being used to train these tools? Or, what risk is there to my intellectual property and privacy, things like that. And then of course, students, the ever evolving world of how they use AI and the information that is discoverable through AI has big implications for how people cite and how people synthesize information and present it as their own or separate that from somebody else's.
When we take all of these areas together, we can take a step back and ask ourselves, do we need a new mental model for how to do research? A lot of us have been trained in a certain way to do research, usually a 6-step process with some circular efforts. But do we need a new mental model given some of the challenges and disruptions that AI is bringing?
So quick sort of discussion question for the room, and Lane, if you can help us with the chat side of things, or it should be whatever, I guess we're up here. Either way, so our question for you, a little touching before we get into like the deeper reflection, is what does it mean for a student to be information literate in their field? So think specifically about your disciplines that you represent or bring to the room, and what does information literacy look like within that context? This is not.
Yeah, this is not, this is just a
Yeah.
live share out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want us to speak generally?
Generally.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah. Just have some minute to gather your thoughts. If you have something to share, well, yeah, we'll take that.
So I'm in communication. So one of the big questions in my field is the ways that language symbolically constructs meaning and structures and knowledge. And so for students to understand that the knowledge that they are consuming, how they choose some sources over another source, and how that actually creates implications for the world that they live in, is probably the big underlying question, that you cannot be literate unless you understand how this information is affecting you.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Language and meaning and use of it, you know.
I didn't even think about AI and how that would impact like semiotics, and like how we like,
It's, yeah.
that's big, that's
Yeah,
really
it's
big.
really big. And how do we get them, how do we get them some of the fundamental knowledge about interaction and communication that is now going to be shaped by discourses we have very little control over?
And that raises some ethical questions, right? When is it appropriate to give over that authority and when is it not, right? Maybe one or two other contributions?
One of the things I like to talk to my students about in terms of AI is we go through and we let AI stumble or give like totally wrong results. And then we have a conversation about that and we talk about like, well, should you be trusting this? You know, what is going into it? Where is it pulling its data from? And then I've done this, I did this before, the night before. But then I'll kind of pull back and I'll say, oh, this is where they're pulling their information from. And you see there's some problems with the sources that they're using that I've found by doing some different background search onto this. So it's one of those things that I sometimes like that, everyone talks about AI, it's really in the news, students are intrigued by it. And then I love to show how it messes up or have it gives you wrong answers, because then I want them to question that always. I always want them to be sifting and winnowing, that great Wisconsin ideal, sifting and winnowing their sources and their ideas. And for me, then it's never about like, oh, it's not so much for me that AI is going to manipulate my students, what they're going to get. It's like, the internet has always been manipulating what the information they're getting. Even what we have in a library and what we choose not to have in a library is a form of manipulation. So it's just for me, then it's just about talking about where do we get our sources? Why do we have these sources? What sources aren't there? And so that's just kind of it's such a wonderful gateway into a larger conversation that sometimes students are like,
Because we really want them to be equipped to sift and winnow.
Yes,
We want them
exactly.
to be empowered to do that and to have some capacity to do that, no matter what the situation is that they face. Yeah, Mark, you had.
Kind of on the same line, not so much strictly AI, but I was thinking about I'm a geologist and we use a lot of case studies. Some are good, some are bad. We use a lot of graphic presentations of information and stuff, not just models, but even more rigorous ones. And I think, trying to get students to actually be able to know how to read a source, to recognize what's a good source, and all those carry right over into AI, and then to also be able to think three-dimensionally. In a lot of geologists, a lot of them are three-dimensional thinkers because of the nature of what we work with and the crazy graphs that some people make. But trying to get them to do that, and I guess what I've worried about in recent years is students have a real hard time reading non-textbook level material and understanding it. And I have a concern that we need to figure out how to do that. And AI, maybe we did it right, could help us with that. But there's something in there which is, it's kind of that point at which I remember very viscerally taking that step up and how critical it is in a desire to kind of accelerate that development and ability to assess things. I had an instructor once who was actually extremely renowned, president of a society, and he came in one day we were starting to read papers. He said, "No, three-quarters of the papers that have been published in our field aren't really worth anything, and the other quarter need to be rewritten and let me demonstrate by shredding his own paper." Very enlightening thing, because you saw how someone could critically critique, including their own work. And I'm just trying to figure out how to translate that into this new world a little bit.
Sounds like that interacts a little bit with Sarah's comments, and that students also need to, have the opportunity to see that there's a need to take it to the next level of description and description and education than a textbook can offer. We'll take a comment from online.
Online, yes, yeah. So Vinolia writes for online that for her field, it's important for students to be able to navigate and utilize AI programming languages and tools. So there's that. And then we have Renee wanted to say something as well. So Renee, please.
Yeah, I teach public health, but also trained in the social sciences. So what we need our students to do is to look at sort of the bulk of this dominant biomedical science and recognize how, and it is improving, but for a long time missing sort of like, how does racism interact with that? Or, what would a feminist studies influence that? And when they look and sort of asking through like the canon of the dominant biomedical literature, like who's been missing from that conversation? And also like what shows up in AI searches, depending on how you ask, and really needing to be literate kind of in both sort of the what is dominant in how we talk about health, and then what has typically, not, I shouldn't say typically, but has potentially been excluded in the past, and needing to pull those together. So
That's a great segue, if I may, just for the sake of time.
I want to give the two people, they had two more comments online, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Sorry, Kate. I just want to give them a chance. Emmanuel writes, an information literate student now is someone who can differentiate between information and misinformation/disinformation. Also, when the student is able to tell when AI is hallucinating. And then Kristen Miller writes, yes, I agree. There's a meta literacy moment when students develop an understanding of how the literature in their field is structured and the work it does. So kind of connecting back.
Yeah, it does connect it back. Thank you, everyone online and in the room, for those comments. Renee's comment is especially helpful because I think she was helping to pull out that it's not just about evaluating the information at hand, but it's also being able to ask questions of the information that you're looking at. And as librarians, again, to kind of ground our expertise and our approach to information literacy, we look and rely heavily on the ACRL, which is the Association of College and Research Libraries, Framework for Information Literacy in Higher Education. So to give you a quick flyover of this framework, it has currently six threshold concepts that we are trying to get students to understand as they engage in an information-rich world, right? I mean, everywhere, no matter your job, you're going to be encountering a lot of information. And so I'm going to briefly fly over these six frames, as again, they help to get us towards that goal of helping students be information literate in your field, even with the presence of AI. So the first one is authority is constructed and contextual. So really here you're thinking about how information is not in a vacuum. Information is created by certain authors with specific rhetorical context, rhetorical purposes, within certain communities of practice. Information creation is a process. Information doesn't just appear, even though it seems, even using AI, that information just appears, but there actually is a process involved there. It might seem like a black box to us, but there is a process in how that information is created. And not all information is created the same. So we try to, get students to think about what are the different ways information is created. Information has value. Again, I think in an information-rich world that we live in, and especially the students we encounter now have always had the internet, and to them the internet seems free. Their parents pay for Wi-Fi. They come to campus and we give them Wi-Fi. There's no sense that any of this information costs any money, and at the same time, there's a false sense that free is best. And so, you know, if the information has value, gets us to kind of push back against that and help students to better understand that. Research as inquiry, I think, is really powerful when we think about AI, because the other, I feel the other danger that students are facing right now, and I think Mark's comment too gets at this a little bit, is that students really are fact finders. And with generative AI, we're getting a sense that information, there's, you know, an answer to a question. And research as inquiry reminds us that research isn't about necessarily fact finding, but it's about probing questions, finding out what do this community think about it? What does that community think about it? What impact does what they say have on this other community over here? So it problematizes why we're searching for information. Again, to support that, we have scholarship as a conversation. So again, we don't have singularity of thought on all questions. There is many conversations happening, often around similar problems with slightly different areas of focus and expertise. So as students encounter information, it's important that they understand that. And then finally, searching as strategic exploration. And I'll say, Heidi hinted at this earlier, that a lot of times people think this is the basic, and this is like, oh, this is really what we need students to know. They really just need to know how to search. But searching as strategic exploration isn't just about searching. It's also about understanding and having a unique, special knowledge about the tools that you're using. As Heidi was talking earlier about using AI, you use it better when you understand it. You understand what it's doing, how it's working. And it's the same with any search tool you're using. It's not just about learning how to search. It's about, again, understanding the tools that you're using. And you don't have to be an expert at it, but you have to understand that tools don't all behave the same. And there's different algorithms in place. There's different biases. There's different information being privileged within those tools.
I did have a question online, just for on that one slide. The ACRL framework is really helpful. Are there tools or trainings you would suggest in this for faculty or non-librarians? So just like.
Yes, I will. We can follow up afterwards with you, Lane, and your links that you hand out.
And the comprehensive framework document, I think your starting place would be reading through that document, and that is one of the resources.
And then Kristen Woodward, who is our head of our teaching and learning team, she usually offers in the fall a workshop for faculty on using the framework to improve research assignments.
Really quickly, here are some of the ways that we have either participated in as librarians or witnessed our students using AI and sort of, we say disrupted here, but really like any sort of change, disruption, or improvement. I think brainstorming, that is a big one. I use it for brainstorming and like example topics for tutorials, for class demos, things like that. Identifying keywords, identifying epistemologies. One of the ways that I have been able to thwart hallucinations really well with AI is asking specifically using the term scholar and saying which scholar coined the term or which scholar developed the concept or wrote about the concept. And then I usually get a couple scholars associated with an epistemology, and then you can kind of dig deeper into that. Similarly, through lateral reading. Lateral reading seems to be like the anecdote to some of this AI stuff. And then like, of course, identifying stakeholders, identifying the folks that are interested or have sort of either a research interest or a personal interest or some sort of authority on a topic. And of course, like finding sources, not an ideal way to use AI, but people are certainly doing that. And that's only going to evolve as our tools sort of adopt and integrate AI. I think reading is a big one, reading and summarizing sources. I think that's sort of what I alluded to as AI being similar to the same use of AI being similar to their patterns of use with Wikipedia, maybe 10, 15 years ago. People are using it to read sources aloud to them, which I also do because I prefer to hear things instead of reading them with my eyes. And then there's some sort of subversion of subject ACEs, online catalogs. And I think a big one is using AI as a reference source. And I've heard that sort of echoed around the room. It's distinct from Wikipedia, it's distinct from an encyclopedia, but people still go there as fact finders. And of course, fact checking and fact finding is a much more complicated process than that. I think we're ready to jump into our reflection activity. So a little bit about what's about to happen next. On your handouts, there should be a QR code that you can use, as well as, I believe, a short URL. Yeah, a short URL, and we'll also share that in the chat. We're gonna go question by question. So if you're not trying to run out of the training early, let's go at the pace of the whole class as we're responding to some of these questions in the document. And the goal of this exercise is to help you identify some of those core research practices specific to your discipline or area of study that you'd like to empower your students, and then to see how that still matrixes into information literacy in the AI environment, and hopefully spark some ideas about how you can still place the emphasis on the kind of like work of learning in the right places to achieve those ongoing information literacy goals for your class.
Any questions before we begin?
All right, so our first question, what are the core research practices and skills for your discipline?
We're just sharing out.
You should be able to add to the document.
I see.
Then I'll switch over to the document.
Yeah.
You want me to switch it? Yeah. No problem.
Yeah.
So.
Be like
Thinking.
3 minutes for question.
And then a 2 minute discussion or 3 minute discussion. We'll see how it goes.
Wait, I'm scheduling. We want to. Reading citation. However well. We can do yeah. Use.
Yeah.
AI tools or pages, whatever we decide to find it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we want to embed any kind of research. Even just like the thinnest of the, in that first segment. Because of what something I'm thinking about is like getting
Folks online are able to get
reading
to the document too?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
just thinking the reading stuff.
Feel free to add in more rows.
Yeah.
Or type below the box if you're out of space.
Readings. I'm thinking specifically project. Do we want to make them responsible? Fine.
Be another 30 seconds or so to get in your last little responses. Your responses aren't little, they're very.
Oh, they're copy and pasting. All right, got it. Kate, I could put a different line in there. I can't do it on my phone. All right.
While Lane's doing that, we'll go ahead and start kind of synthesizing what we're seeing and
Yeah.
highlighting maybe some things that are worth discussing. One thing I see is like, really like the start to finish, right? Again, that research model, that mental model we have about how we do research. They need to have a research question, identifying a research question, thinking about the method to address it, finding and interrogating and integrating sources, writing and citing, you know, that, again, that mental model we have, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say I also like this sociology communicating results research to appropriate audiences, so that sort of rhetorical way of packaging information and thinking about our research, I think is really critical, especially in the AI age. Yeah,
I also see some specific things like using a PICO model within some of the health sciences. Great. Anything else you want to say about that?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think that for all of these, we see that really big question that Mark brought up of how do we move from our, you know, the reading skills that we develop in high school beyond, and then to reading an academic textbook to reading a scholarly article or scholarly literature, and how do we make that jump up, or how do students make that jump up? And I see that reflected throughout.
Next question. Thinking of those skills, which of these practices, skills and practices are being disrupted or changed or improved by AI?
So our two columns here, we have the research practice. So this is sort of your searching, your evaluating, your synthesizing, and then how that's changing.
Yeah, so thinking about when you what you wrote in column, the right-hand column on the first question, that's the core research practice you're thinking about. And how is AI disrupting that, changing it, maybe improving it?
I've been more optimistic about our attendance.
Yeah, this is great. I didn't think we had that many people, so.
Yeah, maybe ask some fresh questions.
Good.
My brain. You're certainly welcome to continue working on this. Should we start synthesizing?
Yeah, let's do that.
So a lot of these I see are getting at sort of like rhetorical packaging, as well as like the synthesizing. I like the word prioritizing here. So identifying like what, not just reading something for comprehension, but identifying like what are the key points that you should be taking away from something. So I would step up even further than comprehension. Yeah, and then we're seeing a lot of like AI assist writing, AI generating questions. I think AI reinforcing this idea of like a right or wrong answers, which as we know as scholars, you know, you can have the same set of evidence and in some cases, not all disciplines, and come to a different conclusion than someone else, even if you share the same set of facts, and AI sort of flattens that for us a little bit. Yeah, accelerated path to understanding. I love this. Explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader. I absolutely do that. Or I will write something in my for a tutorial that I cannot get out of my scholarly technical writing headspace. So I'm just like, make this an 8th grade reading level. And then I get a much more web friendly type of information. But I've done that burden of writing initially. Right. We're going.
Let's move on to the next question. So
Yeah.
I want everyone to keep those disruptions and the changes in mind. And you've already started to anticipate the problems with those disruptions and changes or possible improvements. And I think that's where we want to really focus now. And we only had a couple more minutes left, so this might get a little short shrift, but this would be a good question to continue to wrestle with outside of today. If those processes are being changed by AI, then where really should you be focusing students' creative and disciplinary? That's a key, the disciplinary thinking and your critical thinking. If you know that they're going to be finding sources or generating questions with AI, then how are you going to equip them to ask the right questions of the information that is returned through that AI tool? What are some additional dispositions or disciplinary knowledge that they need to have before they engage in that task? So for the sake of time, I'm going to leave you with that. We're not going to have you generate answers. Like, could you switch me real quickly and I'll close back to our slide deck?
So we will not let Kate present her last portion, but just sort of the framing of this is we talked at the beginning about how will AI change the mental model of research? And this is sort of some of our initial findings of that.
So yeah, so finally, just closing with the big picture here and perhaps a little bit of a long view. As you think about, again, how you can prepare your students to bring creative, disciplinary, and critical thinking to the use of AI. Think about how AI just, again, disrupts this whole research mental model we have, and how do we push against the flattening of its effect on information that AI has? How do we continue to encourage students to be curious in the face of tools that seemingly give them answers? And at the same time, how do we, through our assessment, how do we assess and prioritize the curiosity? Critically look at your own rubrics. Are you privileging the answer or the right essay over how they thought through the problems that they wrote about or spoke about? That's where we're gonna, I think, find the most fruit in engaging with students encountering information in an AI environment. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Just learned so much about information literacy, seeing the results connect. Really appreciate all of you online as well with your questions and your contributions. I just wanted to just wrap things up. I will note on the handout right here, we didn't get a chance to look at it, but there are some experiments for you to do to check out at home. And the big one is to really think about the research options that are available online with AI. And I know I would be really curious, Mark, what you say about these, but there are different tools now that are integrating AI into the research journals. So Kate and Heidi shared a lot of resources with me. Those are all on the slide, on the handout as well. I dug into those, and there's different tools like JSTOR now is integrating AI into the archives. And so it will interact with the content that you pull out. So maybe, Mark, you ask it to summarize a geology paper from within JSTOR, it may be able to give you a better answer than it used to be able to. And I also would notice as well that I found explainpaper.com, Mark, because you're the one that's the big naysayer, and I really want to see, I want to push against the edges. No, it's a good thing, because I love to have that pushback. You're like, geology, it just stinks, and often in history it did too.
No, it's on the history of geology, because there's not many papers. That's
Even
the problem.
more specific. That's
I
good.
think I've also found that I work with history and Black studies and gender and women's studies, and it's definitely not all of those disciplinary knowledges make it into the learning models that these tools use. And in some ways, people talk about them replicating biases. I would argue that AI not projects, but amplifies those sort of biases and gaps in the literature, or maybe smaller areas of literature, because that already exists in the scholarly publishing landscape. Citation bias, underciting women, Black women especially in different fields. And in AI, if it's pulling from those areas, it's only going to continue to create content and really make those problems even bigger if we don't stay mindful to them.
yeah, and be mindful of them as the technology is evolving too, just to kind of think that, because the technology is changing, maybe it'll improve, but maybe it won't, and to be mindful of that, where it's working and where it's not. I did work with, I contacted JSTOR, and so if you email them and let them know you're at UWM, they will give you access to their kind of beta testing, so you can test and see if it works. And so I gave some instructions on that, but again, I just really, this was all, Heidi and Kate, all this great information. It's so much fun to dig through that. And I just wanted to share it with you, just to kind of see where you're testing it this summer, or just kind of figuring out just something to do. So that's on the handout. There will be lab notes as well. But again, Heidi and Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yes. And thank you all for you came, all of you online. Thank you for coming this semester, this year. And we will see you in fall of 2024.